Dat is een vuurwapen. Daar is geschoten. Daar is geschoten. We zien het vuurwerk. We zien het vuurwapen in de lucht. Daar is geschoten.
The 19th of November, Rotterdam riot. Blood, glass, fire, bullets, and rage. To my opinion, the bloodiest riot the Netherlands has seen for quite a while. Welcome to Secure Mindset, the channel where we think before we protect. Now, before I want to cover this topic, this extremely sensitive topic, I have some things that need to be addressed, and a few words and a disclaimer. At Secure Mindset, we talk about protection, rescue, and lifestyle, and the mindset that comes with it. In some videos and some on my podcast, I also covered morals and ethics for protection professionals on this channel. In this matter, I hope that I, as a security officer, can provide an interesting perspective, as I'm not bound currently to a public entity due to my position. Also due to my position, I have experienced the current measures, both as a protection professional, not bound to government interests, and as a Dutch citizen. Sometimes as a protection professional needing to uphold matters, dealing with frustrations from both a government, fellow protection professionals, and not taking on contracts or positions where I don't agree with my point as a protection professional and as a citizen. I'll put out in this podcast, I'll try to put out a neutral perspective to as much as possible, as that is what I think a good protection professional should do, no matter what the interests of the protection professional is bound to. I try to look from all perspectives to the best of my abilities, that from a protection professional and that of a Dutch citizen, and maybe also from a global perspective. Disclaimer, this content may not be used to fuel your agenda. This content may not be used to rile up and is not designed to rile up and polarize crowds and cause further divide in our societies and support structures in this world. This content is not intended to be political in any shape or form, and this video contains a reference to laws. However, this is not proper advice for law and should be taken from a legal advisor. I've done my best to gather this information and make it factual and accurate as possible and try to remain neutral as possible. However, due to the amount of information, it becomes harder to dissect what is true and what is BS. This is to blame on the people who are putting out the information from all sides, wherever government, public, private, no matter where that information comes from, it's mostly curated these times. Wherever intentionally or unintentionally causing misinformation, and to those who will try to twist my words, shame on you and your honor. I hope that you share, like this content, so you can get a perspective and help others to gain a perspective on this measure. Again, I'll try to put things into perspective from both the Dutch side, the Dutch police, the Dutch citizens, the Dutch government, global, and what I think that maybe the future holds. I condemn any violence that has been used from both sides. Yet the secure mindset greatly understands that violence is a tool. One tool that can be used to use destruction to achieve a certain goal, whether if it's defend yourself, to further an agenda, or to straight up use recklessness. First, we need to understand what happened. What happened? What happened is that on currently yesterday, the 19th of November 2021, was the result of a lot of years of bad censorship, bad political agendas, distrust, possible corruption in both public and private entities, and endless amounts of frustration from the Dutch citizens with Dutch government and sometimes even European politicians and politics, as we are in the Netherlands, quietly bound to most of the European policies, and our government mostly follows European policies. The frustration among Dutch citizens has been building up for quite a while now. One of the problems is that we were dealing with a tax problem bound to our government, which I will refer to later on in this video and podcast. Now, personally, I do think that the riots of yesterday do not only matter only to the corona restrictions. There has been a lot of frustration coming out lately due to tightening government policies, due to C-19 restrictions, and more censorship. Yesterday, that tension snapped, where it's planned or unplanned by the rioters. The police fired warning shots and eventually fired live rounds directly at people, injuring multiple people, and there have been messages of possibly killing somebody, but I can't confirm the exact information of somebody being killed. So please be careful with that information. Exact numbers are all over the place, so I'm not naming them as I'm not certain about the number. What you need to know about the Dutch culture of the culture of the Dutch people and the Netherlands before we get into this very, very matter. The Dutch people are generally a law-abiding, progressive, but passive-minded culture that likes rules, laws, and regulations. Politics are mostly left-leaning, sometimes central on the scale, but if you need to put them really in a political box. Our parliament structure is pretty interesting, but I'm not going to go within that at this podcast. Dutch people like direct communication and speak up when they don't agree with something. So 99% of 100% out of the times, we are quite peaceful a trading country without much trouble. We like peace in peaceful and tolerant ways. We don't bear arms, just like most of the other European countries. And it's generally frowned upon in the Netherlands if you bear an arm or a knife or anything with you on the street. So, the current circumstances with added pressure are quite interesting and very unusual for the Netherlands. The direct communication part, in combination with that we are quite stubborn but a creative bunch, means that when pressured and overcooked, we will refer to our geuzen mentality, which is orienting of our culture during the 80 years of war in 1618 until something more. Today went but to say to pressured and taken away our freedoms because we are generally a very free we were a very free country. Don't mess with the Dutch or you'll face resistance, grand resistance, if people will try to take away freedoms on a massive more scale. Now let's get into the perspectives. I have a few perspective interpretations from myself. That's it, the perspective interpretation of the Dutch police, and for me as a security professional, what happened. The perspective from, and for me, interpretation from the rioters. The perspective and interpretation from a Dutch citizen. The perspective and interpretation from the Dutch government. The perspective of the global world and its societies with its agendas. And after that, the aftermath and what I expect in the future as a protection professional with all this going on. So, let's start with the perspective of the Dutch police. And with that, I want to start off with a little bit of Dutch culture. The coat of arms in the Netherlands is sqewd. And I hope that I'm pronouncing that the right way. Meaning in Dutch, ik zal handhaven, what will literally translate to I will maintain or I will uphold. For this English translation, I probably slaughtered the meaning and definition, but I hope that I got it through. Why did I start with this? It means that the part of I will maintain or I will uphold literally is engraved within the Dutch culture. It's within the Dutch coat of arms, to my perspective. And an important thing to keep in mind that when pressured and looking at any protection professional in any circumstance, especially in a confrontational situation, is that a protection professional, no matter his profession, whatever he's security, police, law enforcement, military, firefighter, even EMS or cyber, is bound to protect what he's there for to do. That being said, a protection professional needs to put his safety, and by law, he can do that most of the time, and where applicable, defend himself and his colleagues and his environment from harm and property from harm. And sometimes, in the Dutch definition, honor. Although that's becoming an old definition, sadly. That means if you start putting pressure on him with the tool of violence, that means he has the ability to defend himself, especially when that harm is directly directed towards the protection professional. This can cause and move forward a reaction or provocation by the protection professional themselves, and will use the tool of violence to achieve a goal. And hopefully he will use the tools that are applicable to that situation. When pressure and assumed directed an aim and harm to life or to himself, colleagues, a police officer can use sometimes his weapon when his life is threatened. Because this wasn't just fireworks thrown at them. There were bombs. Just look at the footage. This and many reasons that are not on camera are very likely that the media won't portray or are unable to portray is the reason why the police will produce a firearm. And in Dutch laws we call noodweer. For this video I need to accurately define that to be understood. Because if I literally translate that term to English, the term will translate to literal bad weather. And I don't think that that term does it justice. But to interpret for you, bad weather means literally like in a, let's speak about it figuratively. That under bad weather, you can, when under a threat of violence and being used violence or circumstances against you, you can use the same measure that is being used against you too. Referring to the law book, Dutch Law Book of Strafrecht, Article 41, Lit 1, SR. I'll try to explain this concept to the best of my abilities. So here's a short lesson in self-defense rights in Dutch law. In Dutch law, noodweer is a right justifying ground. Meaning that in circumstances of noodweer, you are able to defend yourself proportionally to the violence that is being put out to you. However, note that in this case, if you're being punched, you can punch back. And in the case of police, using the spiral of violence, and an amount of violence that is being produced to you, you can legally, in most of the time, use a tool that is applicable to that situation. Okay, got it? However, noodweer should not be confused with noodweer excess, meaning that there is an excessive amount of noodweer. Meaning that in your terms of self-defense, you went too far. Sometimes killing the person or doing unnecessary or over amount of damage, being out of proportion of the self-defense act that you were trying to do. Very, very simply explained. For example, you were fighting and you hit the guy so hard you were going blindsided, and you just kept on punching, and by that punching in your self-defense, he hit a curb, and of the reason of him hitting the curb, he died. Very simply explained. And I'm sure that somebody can explain better than I can. And somebody can correct me on this, please. If I do say that differently, please say that I'm wrong in this case, or give a better example. I will really appreciate that. The police has special law that orders that when a police order themselves, they cannot be charged with that act of the order. It's a law, both noodweer excess and the case of the police part, when ordered, are not right justifying grounds, but a release of guilt. Okay? So that means that he is guilty of doing it, but it released the guilt of the act. I'm trying to explain that in English to the best of my abilities, and I'm very likely to be off in English. Due to these cases, it can be portrayed that in some times the wrong tool has been used, or over excessive force has been used for the matter. And in that case, the part of the protection professional, and then I mean the professional part, can be put in question, sometimes legitimately and sometimes illegitimately, by framing, causing a redemption by citizens as they get triggered, as they only see one side of the story. Now, that doesn't mean that when legitimate find cause, that this is a very concerning matter. We have seen that a wrongful decision by a protection professional can cause a huge divide in our support structures from us as a protection professional, but also the support structure and societies of a normal citizen. Just like any protection professional, sometimes you need to use the tools at hand to deal with the situation. And sometimes you make a judgment in a very quick second, and you make the wrong judgment, which always will be backpedaled. And I'm not, absolutely not, for the people who are listening, I'm not justifying any other grounds of over excessive force. But we have to deal with it. And sometimes. And I can assure you that we as protection professionals, I just put it that we sometimes get very frustrated with the court system, politics, and all the other measures that we need to deal with, both personally and professionally, need to deal with it. To me, that same matter and the secure mindset, it's very important that as a protection professional, that the protection professional must understand what agendas are being played and driven. It's important to stand the bigger picture as much as possible. As the protection professionals, we are in front lines when agendas are being played out. And sometimes we are the tools of that agenda, as we are the long arm of that agenda, or government, or points of view, or general accepted ability of understanding of society, which we call laws. So again, that's why it's so essential for you as a protection professional to recognize and see what is being played out currently. And when we don't do that and still man the front lines, and yes, I get it, you need income, but sooner or later, we as protection professionals will become of the part of the problem, possibly. And in that case, I say, granted that we get the heat for it. It's sometimes maybe at this point of view, and this talking about this case that's currently going on and the perspective of a protection professional and the police, and from my perspective of what's been going on, that play stupid games, win stupid prizes is a saying that's being a lot used in the protection professionals, by protection professionals. But this is also true for all parties involved. Perspective and perspectives, of course. Interpretations and agendas, including the government, politicians, rioters, citizens, and the protection professionals themselves. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But in order to that, and I know I'm jumping a bit, you must understand that from the perspective of a protection professional, we don't want to fire our weapons. I can only imagine what those police were thinking when they found it necessary to fire live rounds at protesters. And talking with a lot of protection professionals, I can certainly tell you that most protection professionals eventually will, in some parts, mentally suffer for it. As it's not our duty, most of the times, to enjoy it. Alright? It's not enjoyable to shoot somebody. And we will suffer mentally for it, sooner or later. Now, I can't judge the situation, and I'll keep my personal opinions out of the matter if it was justified to shoot or not, because I wasn't there. And even I found from the footage that's being provided, it's hard to make a good judgment call if it was the right act or not. And it's even that, it's in hindsight. But what I do find is that the position was extremely extreme. Robin. That the position that the police was in was very extreme. But one thing that I can't seem to find, that even a water cannon was used. I can't see footage where tear gas was being used. Well, it's usually a step before that. But I also couldn't see the situation, what led to the police producing a firearm and warning shots. And after that, live fire directed to somebody. And even that, I can't see if it was directly aimed at a particular somebody, or it was just shot at somebody that was part of the crowd. Then there becomes another problem in there. When you shoot a firearm, to my best of my knowledge, in an environment with already a lot of kaboom and explosions going on, in a culture that is not familiar with a lot of firearms and the sound of a real firearm going off, in a hectic environment, we generally don't realize until it's too late. We don't recognize the sound of a firearm, generally, especially not in an explosive environment, and not even directly seeing it. We just ignore it. Now, I hope that this was a part of the perspective of the Dutch police and some culture. Now let's go to the opposite side and see the perspective interpretation from me, from the perspective of the rioters. As we already discussed, that the violence is a tool to achieve a certain goal or agenda. Now, personally, as a protection professional, I understand the power and that the tool of violence has. However, the problem of the tool of violence that it sometimes even divides more than you want to. Sometimes, indeed, peaceful protests are more effective, sometimes even way more effective than just a violent protest. Now, I get that. I absolutely get that to some point the amount of frustration has been put out there that for some reason emotionally people need to react in a way that exerts their emotion. In this case, that's reacted to the protection professional. And I condemn that. You should not, in my perspective, fury your rage against the wrong entity. Now, to one point is that people are being pressured until there has no other options anymore than to put out violence is usually one of the last resorts for people that are feeling frustrated, fearful, want to stand up to something and don't have or find another way to deal with that situation at hand. And then you'll get direct attacks towards law enforcement and police, politicians, government entities, but also the destruction of public property, which I condemn. Why are you aiming as a rioter your anger towards something that did not do harm to you? I don't get that at all. Why do you need to set fire to other people's property that didn't do or had anything to do with the point of rioting? And one thing that is important to note is, as a rioter, rioters often underestimate the power that the group has upon them. Anybody can be that rioter in the right circumstances, for the people who are not able to understand the perception of a rioter. So, Robin, why are you coming from? Well, I have been in a riot position, but not in a position from the riot standpoint. In my academy times, that point of rioting was to help assist the police with training circumstances. So we were throwing blocks and sticks and everything at the police in order to train them in the training scenario, and then everything was cool. Alright? So I have some idea and a perspective what it is to be a rioter, quote unquote. Basically, I get that a rioter wants to put out his frustrations out there because he has no other options to put out that frustration than violence anymore. He has usually tried anything. He's been censored. He's been spoken down to. He's been called crazy. He's been called divided. He's been dehumanized, which is a part that government is easily able to do, and a part where protection professionals are really vulnerable to harm others using the tool of dehumanization, which I condemn. Causing an upheaval amongst people who otherwise would be peaceful to start to riot. Now, let's talk from the perspective of a Dutch citizen. And I do think that we need to look at the point for the discussion of the essential meaning of authoritarian, according to Merriam-Webster, www.merriam-webster.com dictionary authoritarianism. An essential meaning of authoritarian, there we go. Expecting or requiring people to obey laws, not allowing personal freedom. Full definition of authoritarian. 1. Relating to or favoring submission to authority or authoritarian. Parents. Of relating to or favoring a concentration of power in a leader or elite not constitutionally responsible to the people. An authoritarian regime. Now there has been a divide which has been propagated by the means of dehumanization and calling people names and divide and conquer. And this is not only happening with here in the Netherlands, but let's try to put it from a Dutch citizen on what's happening. We have one group that is trying to establish a feeling of safety and security. And we have the other group who is trying to establish a feeling of freedom. One thinks that one is better than the other. One thinks that one gives the other. The problem is that both parties need accountability and responsibility. And both, when not uphold it, can cause an illusion in perspective of your reality. For those put plainly, yeah, that can be quite interesting. As sometimes you can't have both. And at the feeling and of safety and security, you'll need to give up some points of freedom in order for you to get safety and security. Now, there's a reason why I put feeling there. Because there is a difference between reality and feeling. Again, facts don't care about your feelings, as Ben Shapiro likes to say. But that same is the part at the feeling of freedom. Because when people find that they are more cooperative, maybe find that their feeling of freedom has been less cooperative, that their freedom of safety has been infringed. I'm not making sense there. But let's try that over. People may find the problem that the feeling of safety and security has been infringed. So they act in a way in their surroundings and and interact with their surroundings with their feeling that their environment isn't safe and secure. That feeling has been infringed. They feel like that feeling has been lost. And that's the reason why we, as protection professionals and protective entities, a government usually is there to give the feeling of safety and security, even when it not might always be there. In order to do that, we have to take some freedoms away in order to give them a feeling of safety and security. Then we have the other group who is trying to establish a feeling of freedom, who find that more important than the feeling of safety and security. And those groups will always be in conflict with each other. They'll always be in conflict with each other. As one of the earlier podcasts and videos that I did, one of the things that comes forward is one of the examples of the supermarket. You can try to establish a point of feeling of safety and security by putting a guard there, letting everybody locked down, and controlling everybody's bags if nobody's carrying a bomb. We can do that, absolutely. But then your feeling of freedom is going to be infringed at a point when you're at the store, because your feeling of freedom and privacy is being infringed because the security guard is looking through every bag, seeing if you don't have a bomb with you. Then the feeling of freedom is infringed and privacy. And both those let's not condemn them all. They are very, very important. But balance is hard, because you can't have the one without the other. And one group, the group of feeling and safety, that needs that feeling of safety and security is more okay with the Dutch culture coming back forward and around of rules and regulations, because that gives a sense of feeling of safe and security that helps us feel safe and security. And generally in normalized society, that is the general way that we think that it should go. But total freedom, like literal total freedom, is not everything as well. So the point of the group of the feeling of safety and security group has got a point. Because if you have total freedom to do anything you want, trust me, that's that without rules or regulations, that's not good either. But now we have discussed both of these groups. And the interpretation that currently is going on is that there is a divide between those two groups. The one that is trying to establish a feeling of safety and security, and the one that is trying to establish a feeling of freedom. And these two are now fighting with each other, literally. So yeah, the Dutch citizens have been trying to deal with more restrictive environments from the government, from European policy, from global policies, with censorship, and I can see that the divide is slowly adding up, and the group that is valuing virtue of freedom above the feeling of safety and security has been feeling more heat, and it can't let out that frustration. And they can't let out that frustration because that frustration gets put down. They are not able to echo. They are getting censored. Well, the group of the safety and security group that needs that feeling of safety and security group such to feel even more unsafe, because here is these guys of the guys who value more freedom are coming in, and they are you say, we want it back, we want restrictions we want to loosen your rules and regulations, we let it go, please let it go, because we're not feeling free. And you can put that in the shoes of the government, that the point of the feeling of safety security group is going like, no more rules and regulations. I don't feel safe enough yet. Okay? So Dutch citizens are trying to deal with that matter. A very hard and important matter. Now let's talk on the perspective and interpretation from the Dutch government. How would you deal with a problem like this going on? It's trust me, it's goddamn hard to make decisions. Again, as the protection professional, you need to make split-second decisions. Well, the Dutch government has some more time to make decisions. They will carry, hopefully, the responsibility to put that through. Wherever you think that the government, if you're in the safety fitting, or if you're in the safety and security group, or if you're in the loving more freedoms group. But we can't both acknowledge that as a government with laws that I currently have, I need to try to bend it because I need to create new powers for myself to deal with this matter that's going on. And whether you interpret that as a good or a bad thing, okay, I'll keep my personal opinion about out of this as much as I can. But what happened in the Dutch government is that they basically fired themselves a while back, and the government has stepped down because they were being pressured by the opposition due to building pressures over her tax scandal that displaced a lot of Dutch citizens, causing families to rupture, children to be placed out of their homes, divorces and suicides. That to this day has not been fixed on when this podcast being made. And also, from the Dutch citizen point of view, we can see that there has been conflicts of interest within the Dutch government, which contributes to inequality and more interpretation, and not able to fend it out, and not having the accountability. And that's the part what the rioters are trying to achieve. They want accountability, which they are not able to get through the means that the other ways that they can do. And I find they're so frustrated with this point of accountability that they can't. They want to hold somebody accountable for it, basically. Perspective of riot here goes in this case. It's not always with riots that way. Not always. But generally it comes through trying to hold something or someone or an ideological way to be accountable. And with the idea of the government, as they are in the safety and security role, the feeling of safety and security role for themselves, as they are feeling the pressure possibly from the guys that are valuing the safety and security part. That they want to, hey, get this on. I need to, as they are personally feeling, not only as a government, but also from the opposition, they are trying to put out more restrictions, because if you put out more restrictions, it keeps them nice and away out of arm's length, and it keeps it nice and safe. Because I need to hold that feeling of safety and security as a government. Generally, no matter if a government is progressive, yes or no, in my idea, governments should be careful, and usually are careful with policies putting out there slowly. So that's why governments should not usually do poof in one time all of the government policies at once, but gradually increasing the knob at a little bit, increasing the pressure. And in order to make it be normalized in a current society and support structure, because a government is a support structure. We need some point of governance and leadership in this world, as that is our human nature. We can't go without it. We need, but not in the structure that is currently going on with power and corruption. So, with that feeling the heat and putting more on the knob, you get the protection professionals who are like, we need to do something. Their support structures who are literally burning for us. What to do now? That becomes a more of a problem. Now let's look at the perspective of the global world with its societies and its agendas. Well, as mentioned, there's more at stake right now, which I'm certain that there is more at stake, but I don't know what. I can't look behind closed doors, but we can see that there is more pressure putting out on all of societies right now. And yeah, that makes me coming more forth about the next topic. That's the aftermath and what I expect in the future as a protection professional. Now, this is more an opinion piece of the podcast. Okay. Just to start it all, we'll see the government trying to again uphold more things and trying to turn up the knob, causing more violence from both sides, from the safety and security group, and more division from the safety and security group to the ones that are trying to uphold more freedom, which cause more uninjured and will cause more injured and unnecessary deaths due to policy, mandate, or by violence. People being pressured until they have nothing is generally a really bad strategy, especially when they have got nothing more to lose, as never cage an animal that is already insecure or fearful or what to do next. Because at first they will remain silent, then they will speak up a little bit, and then they will attack. And sadly we'll see more of these types of, which I can start to call war, furthering the divide of society and support structures, making us weak from within, and having the risks of our support structures falling apart, on which we are build and uphold our strength. If do they want to achieve that? I don't know. But one thing that we should not do is let ourselves be divided. As protection professionals, and both of the groups would needs to be feeling of safety and security. Because sooner or later, one of these groups will come together and analyze what's going on and feel both the heat. Because there's always a time when the safety and security group will some part need to transfer to the part of freedom. Someday. As I do think that some parts of personal freedom are granted, but maintained. So I hope that this gave you some insights on what's going on here in the Netherlands and some parts of the secure mindset here and here as well. Let me know what you think. This was a long video and a long podcast. So please comment, like, and subscribe. And this was a good one. And I hope that we in the future will be not be dealing with more tyrannical measures from us protection professionals and as citizens. So right, this was Robbie for Secure Mindset, Protection, Rescue, and Lifestyle. Don't forget to think before you protect and stay strong in these times. Secure Mindset. Out.
Lost between love and war, it is rough, so damn tough. Lost between love and war, I said